My name is Earl Willis Jr. Today is May the 24th, and I work for the Warren County Public Library. We're in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and today I'm with Mr. Bridgman.
Right.
Mr. Bridgman, where and when were you born?
I was born in Oklahoma, a little town called Podo. I lived just a few miles down the road from there, a little town called Worcester, in the southeastern part of the state, and that was in June of 1952.
Okay, 1952. Did you have any siblings or brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I had one older brother. He was born and raised in the same location.
Okay.
He passed away about 2 years ago.
Okay. Did you have any, like your mother or your father or any of your siblings, were they in the military?
Yes, they, in fact, they all were.
Okay.
My grandfather, his name was Robert Lee Bridgman. He served in World War I. He
Okay.
was part of an artillery unit. I can't recall exactly which unit it was. He did serve over in France for a short time. My father was in World War II. He was in the Army, and he was in the, let's see, I get it right here, 321st Combat Engineers,
Okay.
96th Infantry, and he served on invasion of Leyte and also an invasion of Okinawa.
Oh, Okinawa, really?
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult battle, and he had a lot of experiences. In fact, I did a similar kind of thing that we're doing here with him some years ago.
Okay.
And he passed away about 3 years. No, my brother passed away about 3 years ago. My dad passed away about a year ago.
Okay. So, do you think this influenced you in your military service?
Absolutely it did, yeah, it sure did. And my brother served in Vietnam, by the way. He was in the Army as well.
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly all that he did over there, but he was
So, do you feel as though the stories and maybe seeing people in uniform and talking to them, do you think that heavily influenced them, heavily influenced you?
Oh, without a doubt. Some of my earliest memories was talking with my grandmother more than my dad didn't talk a whole lot about his experiences. I think that's sort of a common trait for guys during his era.
Yeah.
But my grandmother talked quite a bit about some of the things that she knew about.
Okay.
And she had some old magazines and things like that that had stuff in there related to what he was doing. So, and yeah, that was definitely something that influenced.
Do you remember what you were doing before you entered the military?
Absolutely, I was in college.
Okay.
I had served 3 years, or gone 3 years to college. Previous 2 summers, I had worked as a lifeguard, and then my junior year in college, I was at the end of my junior year in college, I was again working as a lifeguard at a local swimming pool, and I began to realize I got 1 more year of college here, and I had no clue what I wanted to do, and I had no clue where to go with what my degree was, and I just started thinking in terms of, well, what do I really want at this point in my life?
Yeah.
And I really wanted, what I was looking for was some adventure.
Okay.
I wanted something that was different and unique, and that's kind of what got me thinking to some degree about that.
Okay, so what branch did you serve?
This is the United States Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. Okay. Was there a reason why you picked the Coast Guard?
Oddly enough, there was.
Okay.
And it's really kind of, when I tell people this, sometimes they get they look at me kind of odd. But back, probably around 1967, 68, sometime in that frame. I don't know if you're old enough to remember this series, but there was a television series, the old Lassie program.
Okay, I don't remember that. I know of it, but I don't remember it. Yeah.
And at the last season or so, the last few seasons of that series, the dog was attached to a character that was part of the Forest Service.
Okay.
And there was an episode, and it was a 2-part episode. It was called Tempest, not The Tempest, but Tempest. And it actually was filmed at a location in Oregon called the Umpqua River Lifeboat Station. And I'm not going through the whole story and everything, but they had some really fantastic footage of these lifeboats going on a rescue situation and going through some heavy surf and things like that. And I remember seeing that. And watching that program, and it clicked in my mind that really looked kind of interesting. That was something unique, and that was my very first indication that, you know, someday I may want to do something like that. You know, I didn't really have didn't make a decision at that time or anything like that, but it always stuck with me.
Okay.
So that was the first thing that really kind of got me to thinking in those terms.
So you enlisted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what year are we talking? Do you remember?
It was in September of 1973.
Okay. What state were you in at this time?
I was in the state of Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Okay. I always like to ask, do you remember when you were sworn in? Do you remember the sworn in?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Well, what city was that in?
It was in Tulsa.
Tulsa? Okay. What does your mother and your father and your family think about you?
My mom was sort of, well, whatever.
Yeah.
My dad tried to talk me out of it. He said, you need to finish college first and then consider doing it. And he worked on me pretty hard about that.
Okay.
And we had some long discussions, and getting toward the end of that last summer, leading up to it, I just told him, I said, Bob, this is what I want to do. I said, this is my choice. It's not your choice to make, you know. And I said, I'll go back to college when I get out. I'll have the GI Bill. I have all that stuff. I can continue on with my education. And I said, but I need this right now in my life. This is what I want to do. And he said, okay, your choice.
Okay.
Go run with it.
So you remember that pretty well?
Pretty well.
Okay. So do you remember going to your basic training? Do you remember where that took place? And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was in Alameda, California, at their training center there. That they no longer use that facility. At that time, they had two training facilities. One was on the East Coast and one was on the West Coast. And I went along with about 3 other guys from that area to the Alameda Training Center.
Is that in California?
California.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it was a 9-week training session, and I could probably talk for an hour and a half just about that. But
what were some of the things that you like to talk about or stand out the most that you remember about that?
Well, we got there just like any other military service. They get you there early, or very late at night, I should say.
Kind of dark.
Kind of dark. It's late at night. They keep you up late. That first day, you get about 2 hours sleep, if that, and then they're just ramrodding you through just like any other military service would do. But the thing that stood out to me the most, I guess, in looking at it in general terms, was the emphasis at the training center was teamwork. And how do you get along with your other crewmates, and how well do you lift each other up and hold each other up and hold each other accountable, and how well do you take responsibility for what you're supposed to do. And there was a lot of that. Of course, we did a lot of the typical things that they do in boot camp. We had the close order drill and the marching and a lot of physical activity. There's a lot of academics involved with it, a lot of training and nautical skills and things like that. And there were a lot of other
haircuts too.
Haircuts, oh yeah, they buzzed us down just like any other outfit.
Yeah.
And we were if I remember correctly, we were the last company. We were in a company called Alpha 93, and we were the last company to receive a full issue of the old Navy-style uniform. You know, the old jumper suit and and all that stuff. Of course, the Coast Guard had a different dress hat that they wore, but they also had undress blues and things that they wore. They had the typical Navy look to them. And then after our company graduated, everyone behind us received partial issues of the old style uniform and partial issues of the new style uniform that they were going to. And then within probably 6 months or so after we were gone, everyone was getting the new style of uniform, which is looked more like a Air Force type uniform with a blazer and and the typical military hat, those kind of things like that.
So do you remember writing back and forth to your parents or your mother or like your siblings or anybody, your family when you were?
Oh, I did. Yeah, we received I think once a week we'd get letters and things, and I don't recall a whole lot of what I wrote about, other than just some things that we went through, we're going through that week, you know.
Okay.
My letters were probably pretty short and, you know, just direct.
Did you adapt to your being away from home in your military life?
Oh, yeah.
Pretty well?
Actually, I was one of the oldest guys in our outfit.
Okay,
So at that
really?
time, I was already 21 years old
Okay.
at that time. And there was one other guy in there who was like maybe a year older than me.
Okay.
And then everybody else was like 18. So we were, and like I said, I've been to college for 3 years, more or less been kind of out on my own during that time.
Okay.
And a lot of these guys, this first time away from home for them, and so they had a little more difficulty in adjusting to it.
Okay.
Where I didn't have any trouble with it at all.
Does any instructors do you remember? Do you just trying in your mind, or?
I remember him, but I do not remember his name.
Okay. What stood out the most about him?
He was very demanding. He was very direct. He expected us to achieve high level of things, and he got very frustrated with us early on because we weren't there yet. You know, we just hadn't had the experience. And but he drilled us and he drilled us and he drilled us, and our company got the nickname what would they call us? The Crank Kings is what they call it. Crank King. Cranks were push-ups. Because every time, if one person fouled up, everybody was down doing 25 push-ups.
So you're in pretty good shape, right?
Yeah, we were. He ran us. We did all kinds of stuff. I mean, we were in extremely good shape. And oddly enough, our company finished when we graduated at that 9 weeks. We had one of the most successful companies that ever go through there. We had a banner that we carried. It was like on a pole, and then on that pole we had all these ribbons and different things, awards and things that our company had won in different competitions and things like that. And we had one of the most successful ones that ever go through at that.
Do you think it had to do with your instructor?
Absolutely, yeah. He really drilled us pretty hard. In fact, he kind of leaned on me pretty hard too a couple of times, because since I had some college behind me, and he knew all that on the records and everything, he put me in charge of doing. I was like what they call the company clerk.
Okay.
And I had to do a lot of different kinds of things that the other guys didn't have to deal with, and so I had to face a lot of scrutiny and things on keeping a lot of things straight as far as the company finances and, you know, the laundries and things like that.
Plus, you're probably like the old man, right? You were kind of the old man.
I was one of the older guys, yeah. And oddly enough, too, at the end of that 9 weeks, unbeknownst to me, I had nothing to do with it, and it came as a complete surprise. I was voted what they call the best shipmate, and I've got a little plaque for it and everything.
Okay, that's pretty good.
It was really quite an honor to get that.
Yeah. So when you left your basic training, what was your MOS? Do you remember your specialized training? What was your?
Well, I didn't have any specialized training. The way they did it is that while you were in boot camp, you got graded. Okay, we had like 40 guys in our outfit roughly, and through the course of that 9 weeks, we lost a few for various reasons.
Okay.
And at the end of that 9 weeks, we received a set of billets, and it would be 40, maybe a little over 40 billets. And billets were just opportunities for us to go to places that we could choose to go to. And each individual was graded on their performance. While they were in boot camp. And the guy who had the highest score got to pick from the whole list. The guy who had the lowest score got what was left.
Okay.
And I ended up with the number 3 pick in the whole deal. And so I was looking at 3 different units. One of them was I believe it was a 82-footer patrol boat out of somewhere in Hawaii.
Okay.
And another one was a 95-footer somewhere out of Alaska, but I can't remember the exact locations. And the other two, there was 2 other ones actually, and the other one was a lifeboat station. There were 2 lifeboat stations. Both of them were in Oregon. One was at the place called Umpqua River, which was the same location that Lassie program.
Oh, really?
The exact
Okay.
same location. And the other one was at a place called Depot Bay, which is just north of there a little ways. And after talking to a few people and kind of weeding out some things, I selected the Umpqua River program.
Okay.
And And it was just by sheer chance, sheer luck of the draw, that I got to go to that exact unit that initially caught my interest about the Coast Guard some years before that.
That's hard to believe, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I couldn't have written a script for that. It just happened that way.
What year is this?
That would have been in November of '73.
Okay, 73. So, where did you serve? Did you serve in the United States mostly? Or?
Yeah. It was. I could have spent my whole 4 years at that unit. I ended up staying about 2.5 years there, and the Umpqua River Lifeboat Station. Let me kind of give you a little quick understanding of how those work. The best civilian example that I can compare it to would be like a fire station.
Okay.
Fire stations have a crew, and then they have certain things happen, and they go take care of it, and they have rotation crews and things like that. We operated similar to that. We had a relatively small crew. We had about 21, 22 guys on our unit. We had 2 what they call 44-foot motor lifeboats. All of those have since been decommissioned, and they've got a newer, more higher tech boat now. But the 44s were very, very powerful boats. They weren't particularly fast, but they were very powerful boats, and they were very capable boats. They were designed to go through heavy surf, extremely heavy surf, 20-foot breakers or bigger, and be able to take a 360-degree roll in heavy surf and come back up and keep operating.
Okay.
And they were they were extremely rugged boats, and we had 2 of those. And we also had one of the very last 36-foot motor lifeboats. It's a wooden-hulled one that was designed back in the 20s. And they had all been decommissioned except for 2 of them. And at that time, we had one of them that was still in operation.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun to ride on. It was a less capable boat, but it was still a very interesting boat to be out in.
So what part of the did you spend your time in the United States, or did you leave the United States?
It was all inside the United States.
East Coast or West Coast?
West Coast.
West Coast. Okay. Mostly about like Oregon or Washington, or?
I spent 2.5 years at the Umpqua River Lifeboat Station.
Okay.
And then at the end of that 2.5 years, there was an opportunity to become involved with at that time was a brand new concept. It was called an ANT team, an ANT team, and it was going to be based out of Coos Bay, or actually it wasn't Coos Bay, it's a little town called Charleston, but it was technically in Coos Bay. And the ANT team was an aids navigation team, and they were tasked to maintain all the navigational aids pretty much on the full length of the Oregon coast, and even just into the Northern California area. And it was at that time, ANT teams were a brand new concept, and they were just trying to figure out how to make them work. And I was one of the very first people who was selected to go into that unit. And I was only on that unit for it was less than a year, maybe 10 months or so. And then I ended up, oddly enough, and this is something a lot of people find hard to believe, but I ended up getting transferred back to Oklahoma. And I was on what was called, I was on the U.S. Coast Guard vessel or cutter, was the Forsythia. And the Forsythia was basically a river buoy tender. And there was a navigation system that ran from the Port of Catoosa, which is right there by Tulsa, all the way down to the Arkansas River, and then from Arkansas River all the way down to the Mississippi River. And there were a couple of different vessels on there to help maintain the navigation on those boats. So those were the 3 units that I ended up at. And the last 2, like I said, I was only on those for less than a year each time. And I spent about 2.5 years at the first one.
One of the questions I always like to ask people to give them a good example of the people watching is, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed, what will your average day be like? What would you do? How would things work?
At Umpqua River, it depended really on the season. If it was during our busy season, which was from Labor Day until Memorial Day, or Memorial Day until Labor Day. I
Okay.
got those two backwards. Memorial Day until Labor Day. That area was a very busy, I guess you'd call it a tourist area, and there was a lot of commercial boats that would go out of that harbor. There were a lot of charter boats that went out of that harbor, and then during that summer season, we would have a lot of folks come in, and they would bring their own boats down and things like that, and they would go in and
Okay.
out of that harbor. The reason that we were there, and this is probably one of the most important things about that unit, is that the Umpqua River crossing, that's where the mouth of the Umpqua River spills out into the Pacific Ocean. That bar crossing is what they call the bar. Was one of the most dangerous crossings on the West Coast. And
What made it, can you explain to maybe what made it so dangerous?
it was because you had at that point, the Umpqua River was a pretty good sized river.
Okay.
Yeah, so you had a large volume of river flowing into the ocean. You had a lot of storm surges that would come in, and then you had tides and all that stuff in there, and that bar was, it changed all the time because it's being turned, and you could easily, in a stormy session, you could easily have 3 and 4 levels of 20-foot breakers extending across that bar. When it was like that, nothing went out or came in. It was just closed, basically. It was very, very extremely dangerous. And then there were also times during the summer months that you could water ski across it. It would be so calm.
Oh, okay.
So it varied, from almost dead calm to a deathbed or a death trap, and it was a very challenging crossing because there were 3 jetties there. You had the North Jetty, you had the South Jetty, and there was like at that time what they called the training jetty that extended about 2/3 of the way up into it like this, and it kind of turned the river out into the ocean like that. And between that, the front of that North and South Jetty was roughly about a 1/4 mile across. And right in there, you could have some extremely, very volatile waters. And the commercial fishermen were, they were very dependent upon the Coast Guard station to provide them, a measure of safety there.
Okay.
And there were a number of times where that came into play for us while we were there.
Okay. So so would you call it what you were on a lifeboat? Was it a lifeboat?
Well, it was actually a station. It was a
Okay.
shore station.
Okay.
And we had what was called like a boathouse, and we had both boats in there. It's kind of like a fire station would be. You have the trucks. They don't live
Okay.
on the trucks, but they live in the station.
Yeah.
And then during the summer months, when it was so busy, we would always take one boat out, and we'd go on what was called bar patrol, and that's where we would be out on the bar. And we would be out there in case something happened. Or if there was most of the time, the things that happened were just routine. Somebody would have a mechanical breakdown, or they would run out of gas, or something, just some
Okay.
simple little thing like that. And we would go pick them up and bring them in, kind of thing, tow them in. But there were some other instances where it was a life and death situation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And,
Would you, if you feel comfortable about it, can you remember anything that you really saved somebody's life or helped somebody out?
Absolutely, yeah. There was a couple of them that I was somewhat involved in. Well, I was heavily involved in one, and I was somewhat involved in another one. And in fact, I'd only been there just a couple of months, maybe a couple of months. And I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was in January of '74.
Okay.
And the bar was closing up. There were about 3 or 4 commercial boats that were out. They run anywhere from 60-foot down to about 30-foot boats.
Okay.
And they were wanting to come across the bar, but it was getting pretty nasty in there, and they didn't want to do it without some kind of an escort, or without us being there just in case something happened. And so we sent one of our boats out there. And at the same time, and this was pretty unusual, we didn't really do this on every occasion, but on this particular occasion, we sent a shore crew down also in a truck, and then we actually went up on the jetty. And there wouldn't have been a whole lot that we could have done, but we were there to provide assistance if it became necessary. Well, our boat that was out there, the guy that was operating was a guy named Wayne Bauer. He was career guy. He'd been in probably 14, 15 years at the time. He was a first-class bosun mate. The guy that was the engineer was a guy named Dan McKean, I believe is who it was.
Okay.
And he was third-class bosun mate, been in for 3 years or so. And then there were two other guys on there. Typically a crew would be 3, but on this particular occasion they had 4. One guy's named Ed Brazzi. He was a seaman. His guy to handle all the lines and things like that.
Okay.
And then they had another guy on there, a guy named David Mobley. David actually became a very good friend of mine later on. He was brand new to the station at that time.
Okay.
I'd been there, like I said, a couple of months. And they took him out as a training episode for him. Well, it turned into a whole lot more than that.
Okay.
And one of the, 2 of the boats came across without any trouble. And then there was another boat, it was called the Holmes, Holmes.
Okay.
And it was a relatively small double-ender trawler, about a 30-foot boat. And there was a crew of 3 on it. They had a guy who was close to 60-ish, upper 50s, 60 years old.
Okay.
They had his son on there who was probably in his mid-30s, I guess, something like that. And then there was his son was on there.
Oh, really?
He was like 14 or so at the
Yeah.
time. Well, the Holmes was not very fast. It was pretty slow. And they tried to come across, and they were, like, you can kind of remember the jetties, they were kind of sitting out like this. They'd sit out like this, and these breakers were kind of forming in here like so. And you had the beaches running out this way, and our boat was sitting right in here. Well, the Holmes was out here, and he started coming in, and when he came in, a rogue breaker came in behind him, and it was like a 20-foot breaker, and it picked him up, and it started broaching. And broaching, it means that the rear end of the boat starts going faster than the front end, so it starts doing this, and that breaker went right over the top of him and almost rolled him over. And what happened was it killed the engine. It just completely flooded the engine room and everything,
Oh, really?
and they were dead in the water, and they were floundering in that surf, but they were outside the main part of the bar. They were out here like this, and the surge was coming from this direction, so they got pushed around to the south side of that jetty. Where our guys in our boat, I was standing up here on the jetty, and our guys in our boat, they had to fight their way through this surf, come all the way out, come all the way back through, and we had 15, 20-foot breakers all through there. I mean, that boat was just getting the crap beat out of it.
Yeah.
And Wayne had to pull that boat around and pull up alongside of him right in the middle of all of this heavy surf, and I'm standing, I'm not 50 feet from it, but I wasn't anything I could do. I got to watch the whole thing from the jetty. And Wayne pulled that thing around, pulled up alongside of him, exchanged paint with him because he hit him so hard. And Ed Brazzi was down there on the back end of our boat, who had it was kind of like a little cabin area back there, but it had a handrail around it and a place to walk around the edge of it. And he was hanging onto that handrail. And he said, "Come on, guys!" And they started to come. The older man came, jumped over. His son jumped over, and then the 14-year-old panicked. And he got about halfway across and about halfway on, and another breaker come in, and it was just it was just about to hit him. And Ed grabbed the guy up underneath the arm, grabbed him by the back of his shirt like this, flung him over, pinned him down. That breaker hit him. They almost rolled. He pinned him down and held him in place. And then they were able to get him out. And then about 30 seconds later, the Holmes went up on that jetty. It was just a bunch of big rocks is all it was. Went up on that jetty, and it just turned into kindling wood. It just fell apart. And I was standing from here to the end of that pile over there.
So they were within minutes of losing their lives.
Absolutely. And it was a very daring rescue, and it was a very challenging rescue. And all four of those guys actually on our boat got commendations, for pulling that off.
Yeah.
And it was really, really something else. And it was for the very first time. Of course, I'd been there a couple of months, but for the very first time, the reality of why I was there became real. I actually saw it. This is why we're here. This is not a game. This is something that can turn into, in a moment's notice, can turn into a life and death situation. So we always had to be prepared. Always had to be ready.
That make you feel pretty proud?
Absolutely, it did, sure.
Yeah. That was, I mean, you can actually, that was a pretty, very.
And if you have time, I've got another one that I was involved in.
Okay,
More heavily involved. I don't want to take up all the time.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
But it was my second summer there,
Okay.
and by this time I had quite a bit more experience. And like I had said previously in our discussion, I had worked as a lifeguard.
Okay.
And so I had quite a bit of training in
First aid?
CPR, first aid, things like that.
Okay.
And it wasn't a particularly rough day out. It was relatively moderate day out.
Okay.
But there were like 400 pleasure boats out. I mean, they were just scattered everywhere.
Okay.
And there were a lot of commercial boats and everything else out there, and they were just coming in and out, in and out. And we were just kind of sitting there. And after a while, we were after about an hour, and we had switched crews, and the crew I was with had been after about an hour. And we got a call from our station saying that there was a fishing boat, commercial boat, just outside the bar, a little bit south of it, a boat named the Pokey, who had someone on there who had had a heart attack.
Oh.
And they needed assistance. And I mean, there were just boats everywhere. And we had a radar on there, and of course we could, and all we saw was just all these blips, and we didn't know for sure where they were. And the only communication that their boat had, the Pokey had with us, was through a CB radio of all things. They didn't have a marine radio on it. And they would call the harbor office on that CB radio, who would in turn would call our station, who would then relay the information to us. And then anytime we needed to relay information to them, we did just the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, we went out to where we thought they were, and we couldn't quite find them. And we told them to. They had these big booms on there, and we told them to put one up and one down, kind of sort of like this. So that's sort of like a standard distress signal. And sure enough, as soon as they did that, we saw them, and it took us. I think we estimated it was about 8 to 10 minutes for us to get to them. And the way we operated is that if anyone from our boat had to board another boat, it was always the duty seaman who did it, and that's who I was at the time,
Okay.
the seaman on board there. So I jumped over on the boat, and I found this older gentleman. He was in his 70s, I guess, probably 75, maybe a little older, and he was just laying down on the back of it. And there were 2 other adults and 1 small child on there. The child was 7, 8 years old, and a young girl. And then I think the young man on there was his son, and I think the lady that was on there was his wife, I believe.
Okay.
I guess it was. And so I jumped over there and I started checking the guy, and he wasn't breathing. He had no pulse. I mean, technically he was dead, and there wasn't anything going on with him. But there was no room to operate there. I couldn't do anything where he was laying. And so we had to move him over to a different position so I could start CPR on him. So I asked the guy to come over. We got to move him. So we picked him up, we moved him over, and I stood up to reposition myself. And the Pokey, it was a little double-ender boat. It was about 25-foot boat long, 25 feet long, and had an engine right in the center of it. And coming out of that engine, there was a cowling over it, but coming out of that engine was an exhaust pipe that stuck straight up.
Okay.
It was completely, totally exposed. And then there's a little cabin up front where they would drive the boat and operate the boat. And when I stood up, a little swell came in, and my feet kind of got tangled, and I was about to fall, and I just instinctively, out of my peripheral vision, grabbed the first thing that was there to keep myself from falling over, and I grabbed that exhaust pipe. And it just absolutely fried.
Do you
my
still
right
have a
hand.
scar on your hand?
There's no scar on it. I'll explain all that to you here in a little bit. But it absolutely fried my right hand. And I mean, and I pulled it off. I went like this, and my arm was just pain was just shooting up and down my arm. And it hurt so bad, and it fried it so bad, it just curled up like this.
And you still have to do CPR
I
on
still had to
somebody.
work on the guy because they didn't know anything. They didn't know how to do anything. And I'm sitting there, and I was cursing myself because I'd been so stupid to do something like that, And I looked at them, and they had this, this fear in their eye. They didn't know what was going on. And so I got down there and started working on the guy, and I started, breathing for him, started doing the compressions and stuff, and realized that I wasn't going to be able to do it effectively with this burned hand. And so I incorporated a young man to come down to help me. I showed him how to do the breathing, and I did the compressions. And while we were working on him, I looked up. Our boat had already kind of pulled off to one side, and we weren't going anywhere. We were just kind of floundering around out there. And I told the lady, I said, take us back in. We can't just sit out here. We got to go back in. Take us back across the bar and go into the Coast Guard station there, and we'll have an ambulance waiting on them. And so she started to drive it in, but the boat was very aptly named Pokey, because
Pokey,
that
slow.
was the slowest boat I've ever been on in my life. You could have swam in faster than that. It was slow. It just felt like that. And so we were working on it. We finally got in across the channel, and Michael Dobbins was the guy that was running our boat, and he was out in front of us. And then we had Michael Cullimore was our engineer on our boat, and he was maybe 50 yards in front of us, and he had a light going and things like that, but didn't have any siren going or anything. And I kept working on him, and he wasn't responding, and I knew we were going way too slow. So I had told the lady, call the harbor office and tell the station to have Michael come in, and we're going to transfer him to our boat, and we'll be able to get him in there faster. And sure enough, less than a minute later, boy, here he comes, and Michael brings the Michael Cullimore, the engineer. He brings a stretcher over. We stop everything, put him on that, lift him over. Then Michael Cullimore and I started working on him on our boat, and he took off. Now, Michael Dobbins, the guy, the boat coxswain, he's a whole story all by himself. But he was never one to waste an opportunity for drama.
Okay.
And he flipped those blue lights on, and he flipped that siren on, and man, I mean, it's just blaring. And we're in that main channel, and there were just hundreds of boats in and out.
Yeah.
And when he did that, they just all parted. I mean, they just literally just did this, and we had to open, and we just barreling down through there, and then we had to turn into this little entrance channel, and our Coast Guard station was down here just a little ways. And then on the other side of that was a fuel dock, and that's where we would normally pull into. And normally you would just idle down through there, and then you would just idle up to the fuel dock. He came down through that entrance channel full speed, full open bore, and man, throwing out a big giant wake and everything. And as he got close to the boat dock there, he backed it off a little bit, but he was still going almost full speed. And he just flipped that thing around, went reverse on one throttle and forward on the other throttle, and spun that boat around, and almost full speed just slammed right into that fuel dock. And just before he hit the fuel dock, he went full reverse on both engines. The whole boat just shuddered and just flopped it right in, just perfect. And then by that time, the ambulance crew was there, and they jumped in and they kind of got it started. And of course, I was hurting so bad I couldn't hardly function by this time, and my hand was hurting so bad. And as the ambulance crew was working on him, they were getting ready to put him in the ambulance. I told our commanding officer, as Chief McMichaels is who it was, I said, Chief, man, I burnt my hand real bad out there. I said, I need to get this thing looked at because it's about to kill me. And he said, well, go with them, and you can help the other. There was only two of the ambulance guys. He said, you can assist the one guy in the back end there. Well, he's doing that, and then once you get there and everything is settled out, go ahead and get your hand looked at. And so I did. I got in the back end, and I assisted the ambulance EMT guy all the way into the emergency room, and then they took the man in there. I sat out front there, and we're in the hallway, just kind of holding my hand just because it was hurting so bad.
Yeah.
And after about 30 minutes or so, one of the nurses came out who just happened to be married to one of our crew members up there. And she came out and he said, man, you guys did a good job. He said, they got him. They said, they got his heart's beating. He's breathing on his own. I said, they think he might make it,
Yeah.
I said, well, okay, I'm glad. And I'm sitting there doing this. And she goes, what's wrong with your hand? I said, I burned it. And she took a look at it, and she goes, oh, my gosh. And so she got the doctor out there, and he did some work on it and everything. He put some salve on it, bound it up. And I went back about a week later, and there was a big giant blister on it. The thing was about the size of a tennis ball on my hand.
Oh, really?
And he cut that blister off and put some more stuff on it, and it healed up perfectly. I never had another
So
problem.
you don't have a scar now?
Don't have a scar or anything. It was a real bad second-degree burn.
Oh, yeah.
Very painful, but it didn't scar it or anything.
Were you really excited and pumped up about saving that guy's life? Did it still hurt when you burned yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it was screaming at me the whole time. I mean,
so you still felt the pain?
Yeah, and it was screaming at me, and but I had to do what I had to do because they didn't. There was no one else there that could have done that at that point. They didn't know what to do, and they were scared, and they were uncertain, and you could just see it in their eyes, and that's what I was there for.
It's like you really stepped up that day.
Yeah, I hope I did. And it was one of those things that I guess it was a question that part of the reason why I went in was it was a question to myself, would I be able to actually step up if and when the time came? Could I do this? Could I really do this?
Yeah.
And that answered that question pretty
Yeah,
well.
I think it did.
But anyway, that was a little bit exciting, and we got some commendations for that one.
Yeah, that's it's like when you make a difference in somebody's life, you always remember that. That was probably what, 45 years ago.
Yeah, it was in 1974, however long that was. 43. 43 years ago.
So that's really good. Do you remember when you left the service? How did you transfer from the service to your civilian life? How did you transfer over?
Well, it was I had gone from the Umpqua River Station to the Ant Team, Coos Bay, and we were the initial, very first crew of a very new process, and we got that established, and we got it functioning, and we got it up and running, and then after about 9 or 10 months or so, I was transferred to the Forsythia on the Arkansas River, McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system. And that was some of the hardest, dirtiest, nastiest work I ever did in my life.
Really?
But I wouldn't have traded it for anything. And because it was a completely different world from the lifeboat station. Because you lived on the boat, and I mean, it was cold when it was cold, it was hot when it was hot, and it was hard work, physical work, and there was a certain measure of danger to it too, because you were dealing with heavy weights and things, and there was a lot of work to that. And I realized that I wasn't going to be getting out. In order to transfer to that station, it was in Sallisaw, Oklahoma, it was on the Kerr Lake down there. I had to actually extend my enlistment by a couple of months.
Okay.
And because I had to extend it for a couple of months, in order for me to go back to college, I would have had to have waited really all the way until like the summer session, and so I'd have lost like 6 months of time to get into school again. And so I did a little bit of research, and I found out that they had this thing called an early out, but you had to have a really good reason for it. And I talked to the ship's yeoman about it, and he said, yeah, they almost never do that. I said, you don't even want to try it because they're not going to give it to you. I said, well, I'd like to at least try it. And so I wrote out my reasons why I wanted to get out in August so I could get enrolled in school and start that September session, as opposed to waiting until like November or whatever it was it would have been because of my extension. And he submitted it, and sure enough, they approved it. And so I was able to get out a little bit early, and actually it turned out to be about 2 weeks earlier than what my normal enlistment would have run.
Okay.
But because of the extension, it was about a little over 2 months early from what it would have been because of the extension. So I was able to get out there, and immediately enrolled back in college. I went to school there in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is where I'd been going before, and got my GI Bill benefits all lined out. I had a little trouble with that because somebody in the office there forgot to mail my stuff in.
Okay.
That drug out for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Finally got that straightened out. But the transition was easy for me. At that time, I was ready to get out. I mean, I had done what I intended to do, and that's kind of how it all played out.
And you kept your promise to your dad too.
I did. I told him I was going to go back to school when I got out, and I did.
Yeah. So, are you retired now, or do you still work?
Semi-retired.
Semi-retired?
I retired about 2 years ago, and then a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago, I started working part-time.
Okay. I guess in closing, what would you have people to watch this? What would you have them to get from this interview?
Actually, there's a whole lot more to it than I can probably put in just a few minutes.
Okay.
It's one of those situations where I wanted to challenge myself to do something that I wasn't sure I was really going to be able to do. And I felt that I could do it, but until I was actually faced with it, I didn't know that I was going to be able to do it. And it was one of those kind of experiences where I went into it searching for something, but not yet really knowing what it was I was searching for.
Okay.
And when I came out, I understood better about why I went in, and I understood more about who I was as an individual and what my capabilities were. Because while I was in there, and that was at every unit that I was at 3 different units, and at every single unit I had a challenge each time to where I went right to that edge, and then I had to step across it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I'd ever be, I wasn't sure I was able to step across it. And the training that I received, the experience that I received, the friendships, I created lifelong friendships with some of these guys. I'm still friends with my one of my commanding officers we had at Umpqua River.
Okay.
David Mobley, the guy that I talked about in that very first incident, who was on that boat where the homes went up on the jetty and everything. He was one of the crewmen on there. He and I became really good friends, and he was actually the best man at my wedding some years later. And oddly enough, about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, he died of complications of diabetes, and his wife made arrangements at the Umpqua River Station to take his ashes out on that Umpqua River bar and to pour them out on that bar, because that was such a memorable moment in time for him.
Yeah.
And she wanted him to have that one last closure for that.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of experience that I had in the Coast Guard. It's not uncommon, or I say not unusual, not unusual for most people in there to have similar kind of experiences where you create not only lifelong friendships, you create lifelong experiences, and you create, you are thrown into situations that you're not getting shot at, but they're just as dangerous and just as life-threatening.
Yeah.
And just as you have a different focus, a different mission, a different purpose.
Lives are on the line, aren't they?
Right, and lives were on the line at times, and it was, and so it was an experience that after 4 years, I was ready to leave, go on with my life.
Yeah.
But it's an experience that I would never trade for anything in the world.
Yeah.
And to kind of sum that up, one of the things that we did at the Umpqua River was there was a lighthouse there. There's lighthouses all up along that west coast, and the Umpqua River had a lighthouse. It was like it's an old lighthouse. Back then, it was close to 100 years old.
Yeah.
It's well over that now, almost 150 years old now. And it had a 60-foot tall lighthouse. It had a one of a kind, they call a Fresnel lens in it. It's like a big dome. That dome would rotate around the light, and part of the duties that we had was to maintain that light. And I jumped at the opportunity every chance I could to go, because I just absolutely loved being in that lighthouse. And it became sort of a metaphor in a way of my experience in the Coast Guard, because the lighthouse was anchored in such a way that it was anchored to the past. But yet the beams of light that came out of that, there was 2 white beams and 1 red beam, and they would come out and they would rotate around, and you just see these beams of light that would just rotate across the horizon like this, and you could see it for miles out there. Those beams of light, in essence, pointed to the future.
Yeah.
Even though it was anchored to the past, it was still pointing to the future. And so I look at my experience very similar to that a huge part of my life is anchored in the past. But yet everything that came out of that experience in the Coast Guard changed my life in the future, all the way down the line.
Yeah.
And everything I have done today, everything I do today, every experience I have today, whether it be work-related, whether it be people-related, whether it be just things for fun. It's not the person I am today that's doing it. It's that young man back then who experienced those things and went through those experiences that is doing them today.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to leave as a legacy as far as the Coast Guard goes.
Yeah.
It's a great service, and it is a tremendous opportunity, especially today, because things are so much different today than they were then.
Well, I just want to thank you for telling your story, and that's why we have these interviews. It's for people like yourself to say the stories and say with the community. And I just want to thank you for your service, and I appreciate this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, I appreciate you asking.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.